Welcome to Ahead of the Game, a podcast brought to you by the Digital Marketing Institute. I'm your host, Will Francis, and today I'm talking to Maurice Wheeler. He's CEO of We Are Family, who are a full-service agency that do research, strategy, creative, and marketing for some of the best-known brands in the kids, teens, and family space. Their client list literally reads like a list of brands that any parent will be familiar with, people like Hasbro, Moonbug. So he worked with Blippi recently, Paramount, Nickelodeon, and that kind of thing. And I'm really looking forward to grill Maurice all about this space because it's not something we've really talked about. So welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
So just to get us going, give me a sense of the kind of work you are currently doing to help brands connect with kids, teens, and families.
I would say a lot of what we do is about understanding the audience. It's slightly a cliche to say, but with this audience particularly, you've got to really understand what makes them tick. So we've got a healthy sized research and strategy team who are all the time talking to the audience to make sure we understand what excites them, what inspires them. And we spend a lot of time helping our clients really understand the audience better. And that's everything from broad lifestyle, ethnographic-y type stuff. You know, what is cool and what is on trend, down to much more kind of nuanced development stages stuff. What can younger children actually kind of comprehend when it comes to content or when it comes to digital apps? And then it's translating those insights into actionable marketing campaigns.
That's really interesting. So actually, just a lot of your clients are just a bit lost as to what will actually resonate with younger people. I'm curious, like, what are some of the more surprising things that you've found out recently?
I wouldn't say lost, only because that kind of implies that they don't know what's going on. I think they do know what's going on. The point is that it changes so rapidly that they are consistently wanting to update themselves on the situation. And as far as the things that are going on, so we've just done something quite interesting around humor, and that changes. The whole meme culture is obviously changing so rapidly, and what children find funny. The fact that it's so confusing to people like us is probably the reason why kids think it's just so funny, because it just doesn't make sense. It's just totally abstract and surreal, which has always been something that has happened. You know, we as kids used to watch stuff and my parents would look at it and go, what is that? We just did some really interesting stuff around teenage boys and the whole kind of manosphere, what it means to be a teenage boy, what masculinity means to teenagers, which is again super interesting with regards to their take on that whole side of things. And then again, it's the constant looking at new and developing IPs and what works and what doesn't work and what children find engaging and what they don't find engaging, and toys, and finally the kind of final piece is the parents. So we spend a lot of time understanding what parents want. That has actually changed quite rapidly since COVID. COVID was definitely a period of more lax screen time limits within a lot of households that were very much like, if I can put my child in front of the iPad for the next 2 hours and get some work done, then that's great. And I think now there's a little bit of, okay, that was probably a bit too much and we don't have that excuse anymore. So there's a little bit of a shift back to the more kind of screen-free kind of parenting side of things. So kind of managing that side as parents shift back to a more, screen-free entertainment and environment.
God, that's so interesting. I can see why that keeps your interest, every day. So you find this stuff out on behalf of brands. What are some typical ways that they would act on those insights?
So it might be about how they would, so for a lot of stuff around the teenagers, it might be how they look at brand partnerships. So who are the cool brands that they want to partner with? Cool, obviously not a cool term, but there's sadly nothing else that fits the criteria. So that might be around brand partnerships and influencers and content creators that teenagers think is cool. Humor as well. So again, in advertising assets, humor kind of works quite well with this audience. So understanding what that kind of comms content strategy might look like. For parents, it's a lot about how you communicate what your brand is. So parents typically will want things like education and safety and value and all the kind of core things, but some parents will be looking for developing soft skills. And again, it's understanding how that brand matches against that, and then how you then articulate the communications to then say, we are those things that you are looking for if they are. And then the last bit would be, where are they? I mean, teenagers and kids are kind of, is it Roblox? Is it TikTok? Is it Insta? Is it Snapchat? Where are they? How do you knit those platforms together into a kind of a more cohesive comms and kind of content strategy? So it feeds in all the way through to product development as well. So we work a lot on product development, so particularly around toys or digital products, and making sure that, again, the kid can understand what this thing does and it does the thing that it's meant to do, and they don't look at it and go, I don't understand how it works. So yeah, kind of it really does impact a lot of stuff.
And just as a layer on top of that, when I worked in advertising agencies, like no idea was off the table. You could be a bit naughty, a bit cheeky, a bit risky. You could literally come up, with any idea. Not that it'd get signed off by the client, but it was very, very open. Whereas obviously you're working in quite slightly tighter restraints in that there has to be this kind of wholesomeness, and there's a safety element, and there's quite a big ethical pressure on you, isn't there? How do you handle that, and what does that look like?
We do take that very seriously, as we have to, for multiple reasons. We have a thing called the Family Safe Shield, which is our kind of internal company-wide pledge, if you like, on kind of 4 key pledges around what we will do and what we will not do. You've got GDPR, you've got COPPA compliance, and you've got those things, and really you've got to treat those as a baseline, not a ceiling. They are that's the absolute bare minimum that you should be doing from a kind of compliance perspective. But the other thing, as you mentioned, is the kind of ethical and moral perspective as well. And it's hard, and as you say, when you're working with adults, it's great fun because you can really throw lots at it. You don't have that constant question of, is this manipulative? Is this potentially exploiting naivety? Am I kind of, doing a little bit of, the whole behavioral economics thing, that and kind of nudge theory and all of this sort of stuff, which is great fun to play with from a kind of cerebral and strategic perspective, to go, oh, maybe if we position the 3 products like this, then they'll naturally go for the silver. And you can't do that with kids, that's manipulative. And we've got to make sure that we are marketing without manipulation. And that is absolutely imperative. There's many reasons for that. One is we have a legal responsibility. 2, we have an ethical responsibility. And 3, typically the clients that we work with, if a client is in the kids, teens and family space, they're there because they care about kids, teens and families. And they don't want to work on kind of unethical campaigns that might be manipulating children. So, and nor do we. So yeah, it is a challenge, and having worked on many a campaign in the past for, various not kids brands, they're definitely fun. We've worked on a kind of an energy drink, and it's great fun because you can really go crazy with it. But I get an enjoyment out of the fact that it's the world I live in now is much more restricted with guardrails that mean that actually the creativity needs to exist within the guardrails. And actually, that's probably more intelligent and cognitively challenging than it is to just, let's come up with a crazy stunt.
It's true that, yeah, because I think, look, there's something that all marketers have deep within this. I wouldn't say it's a full-on guilt, but it's like a worry that, like, am I really helping the world here? Am I part of the solution? Am I doing, work? Am I doing worthwhile work here for the human race? Or am I just selling more crisps? And I suppose I can imagine that you feel a bit better about what you do because you do, as a baseline, it's all quite wholesome, whether that's, complying with very strict legal guidelines like GDPR, or just more broadly helping to not only entertain but educate kids and, share certain values with them, right?
Yeah, I've got friends who are bankers and lawyers, and I often joke that that marketeers can be just as bad as bankers and lawyers, but we've just got better PR.
Yeah.
And I think to a large degree that can be true. But yeah, I think what I enjoy knowing is the fact that we can't go down that route of kind of unethically manipulating. We don't want to anyway, but it definitely makes the job harder, which in some respects makes it a bit more fun. And they always say that creativity is actually at its best when it's within quite strict guidelines. And that's when you really get to kind of actually go, okay, well, let's have some proper creative thought about how we stay within the guidelines, stay within the kind of ethical and moral guidelines that we set ourselves, but at the same time, be creative, be innovative, be novel, and do all those things as well.
So what does marketing look like when it's not manipulation?
Well, we can market to parents. That's fine. But when it comes to children, a lot of the time it's about creating engaging content. A lot of our clients are in the IP space. So whether that be as you mentioned, like a Nickelodeon or Paramount or a Moonbug or a Disney, and so they've got some great content. So they just want to make sure that the kids can consume that great content, and are aware of the products that are available around that kind of content. It's a lot of it is kind of a distribution awareness strategy of making sure that our clients' stuff get in front of them, whether that be on a YouTube or a Spotify or or wherever it may be.
Yeah, it's about building relationships and, like you say, entertaining them and connecting them with your clients' content. But we're talking about a group of people here that, I mean, I know as a parent, like every year that goes past, my kids change hugely. So we're actually talking, if you're talking like from 0 to 18, like that's at least 18 different cohorts of people. So how do you deal with that? Do you have specialists for different age groups or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people who don't deal necessarily with the under 18-year-olds realize is that actually the age gaps are enormous. The difference between an 8 and a 12-year-old is bigger than the difference between a 28 and a 42-year-old. Like those differences are enormous, and they're enormous across multiple levels. So cognitively, they are completely different species in many respects. Like their ability to be able to understand interconnecting philosophies is just not there. If they're younger, their social abilities and their social kind of dynamics is completely different. Even their physical dynamics and what they can actually manipulate and do is completely different. So the trends that they're involved with, the platforms that they're on, everything is completely different across those audiences. And almost one of our nightmares is working with a client who goes, our target markets is 2 to 18. You're like, oh man. So, over the years, I've been working in the kids space for about 15 odd years, and it's just about developing out that structure and that framework for what these children are. And actually the fundamentals haven't probably changed in 3,000 years, because so much of it is driven by just the brain's ability to be able to comprehend certain things. So actually, you say 18 different cohorts within a 0 to 18. We have 9. We kind of break it down into almost every other year. There's a whole different kind of thing going on and cohort going on. And we just make sure that every time we do any form of research, we kind of go back to our main grid and go, okay, is this the same still? What's changed? What's different? What's big in these spaces? That's why, as I mentioned up top, research is just so important for what we do. There's no way we could just be a pure marketing agency without the research and the strategy side of things, because it would just be utterly impossible. Our campaigns would be out of date within 2 months of coming up with an idea if we're not eternally on it. And we speak to tens of thousands of children around the world every year, and both literally, physically, one-on-one focus groups. We probably speak to hundreds of those, and then from a quant perspective, it's literally tens of thousands of children that we speak to every year. So we are eternally on a knowledge journey to make sure that we understand what's going on, because our job would be utterly impossible without it.
That's quite a feat. Just tell me a little bit about how you actually do that.
So we will literally organize focus groups. So again, a lot of our clients come to us for the research. So, we're lucky that their constant striving for knowledge means that we constantly learn. So a lot of our clients will do, again, focus groups, IDIs, diary studies, online communities. We've done research down to 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. We did a massive piece with Blippi and Unilever for one of their big programs looking at body image and how younger children understand their body image. We're working with the Bristol Centre for Appearance Research, and we did one-on-one interviews with over 400 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds around the country. We did that in the in London and just outside London and in Birmingham, I think it was. And that was, we literally we hired a massive room. We had 15 moderators. All of our team are obviously experts in moderation, and sat down with kids. And again, a lot of it is about understanding how to ask them the right questions. You can't just sit them down and go, tell me, what do you think about your body, and talk to me about your body image. You've just got to, again, know how to ask the right questions to get the right answers. But a lot of it is that. And then we've obviously got a big global network. So we're currently running research in Brazil, Japan, South Korea, across the kind of UFIG's main 5 markets in Europe, the US, Canada. So we've got a big global network of researchers, as well as actual offices on the ground. So we've got offices on the ground in 5 odd countries.
Well, that's a real operation, isn't it? I mean, the logistics and the safeguarding and the the organization of all that must be so much work. But I think you mentioned with in partnership with Blippi and in the UK, you're learning stuff there that no one else is probably learning. That's quite unique knowledge that you're gathering there. Where's that going? I mean, are you sharing any of that publicly?
Well, yes. So that particular piece I mentioned there was very specifically, that's a publicly published academic paper by it's UWE, so the University of West England, and their department for the Centre of Appearance Research, which was done in partnership with Unilever. So we were kind of they were the main brains academic department that were kind of doing all of the analysis and all of that stuff. We were the kind of moderators on the ground to kind of help them facilitate it. So that's all been published. But a lot of the rest of the stuff isn't. I mean, we do trend debriefs on a monthly basis, which we send out to all of our clients, and we put stuff on the blogs. But a lot of it is kind of client owned knowledge that kind of sits with them and is their competitive advantage, I guess.
I mean, that's great, and I think just you opening that up and hearing about that from you, we're here to talk about marketing, but just to hear the depth of the research that goes on behind what you do is great, because I'm always trying to I'm always banging the drum for the fact that the job of marketing is mostly research. It's not all like crafting the perfect copy for that next Instagram ad or whatever. Most of it is just learning inside, like crawling inside the heads of your audience. So it's very interesting to hear. And this might sound like a really stupid question, because I've not worked on the same stuff as you, but do you have like personas for kids then? Like marketing personas for them?
Not really. No, we have.
Because are you marketing at them, and at what point is there sort of follow on? At what point are you marketing at the parents as you kind of go down the ages as well?
We wouldn't market to anyone really under 16. So there's no marketing personas. We have personas, which is again much more developmental personas. So they will be. So for example, we've got and again, it's always awkward to try and put ages, because children grow up at different rates, boys and girls at different rates, etc., etc. But we have one, for example, called the tribal sharer, and that's normally a kind of a 7 to 8 year old type age, and that's a child that's just gone from kind of typically, again, it happens globally, but most children move into a new academic environment around the age of kind of 7 across most markets. So that's a new world for them. They've just gone into a new social space. They're actually cognitively getting much more in tune with the value of friends. Up to that point, friends are kind of side-by-side playmates, whereas all of a sudden there's a benefit in a kind of a more of a social group. So they're becoming much more kind of in tune with that social side. So we call them tribal sharers, because typically what they'll do is they'll go, okay, how do I fit in? They'll, the first thing they'll try and do is kind of fit in with all of their friends. And so they'll all kind of, I often talk about a murmuration of starlings, where they're all just kind of running around and just, there's no one leader. They're just all following each other type stuff. And then, so within that world of tribal sharing, a lot of it is about, fandoms and establishing, oh, I'm a fan of this, you're a fan of this, okay, let's be kind of friends together. What we don't then go on to do is your classic marketing persona of, and this is, here are the key channels that they might be sitting in, and here are the most important ways to encourage them to buy your product, because you're not selling to them. They're not the end buyer. Each campaign, we've got really 3 audiences and 1 message, which is just makes it even more of an exciting challenge, because you've got the child, who is probably going to be the end consumer or the end user, but they're not going to be the purchaser. They're not going to make the sales decision. That's going to be the parent. And then you've got platform. So, you're trying to craft a message where you want the child to go, oh, that looks great. And then you've got the parent who goes, it's safe and it's value and it's educational. And you've got the platform that wants like engagement and all that side of things. So you've got to kind of craft this kind of horrible Venn diagram and work out what's that sweet spot right in the middle, which plays to all of them, or you've end up with kind of two different campaigns of one for the parent and one for the child. So yeah, it's an exciting
that's
challenge.
Interesting. And when you say the platform, just what exactly do you mean?
So
like the channel, the marketing channel, like
yeah, exactly.
TikTok or something.
So, how you might articulate a message across TikTok or, again, if we're talking about older children here, obviously, or
Yes.
Insta, or if we're talking about Roblox, each of them require something quite different in order to be successful, which might not always necessarily be what you want to be doing. You don't want to be creating content for TikTok that is excessively manipulating them, obviously, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's that kind of delicate balance between all three.
That's a really
Forces.
interesting. I've not really heard someone describe it in that way, actually. That you have like the three audiences for a message, because we normally think of there being one, and it's the person we're selling to, and okay, with your stuff, there's also the child, but there's this third one of the platform. It has to the same message has to work for that platform in a broader sense.
Yeah,
That's
and that
interesting.
Yeah, particularly when you talk about things like, when you're talking to parents about the educational value of a product and how it might be developing and growing out some important social skills, that type of message is really hard to get in a 2-second hook that's going to really ping off on TikTok. That's a longer story. So, trying to make those two work together is a challenge, and the solution might be, well, TikTok's not where you talk about that, but if that's where your audience is, how do you then create a message that has some kind of juicy 2-second hook in the first 2 minutes, but the first 2 seconds, but then goes on to explain about the educational, the safeguarding, the value, all the bits that we know parents want to hear, which isn't necessarily what works on TikTok. So yeah.
We're talking about this in the context of marketing, and normally we think in the just grown-up world, we think of marketing as text, images, and videos in places like LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, maybe some display and YouTube, etc. But with kids, you actually probably, I imagine some of the stuff ends up you actually creating experiences in places like Roblox, perhaps, where these are far more kind of immersive and harder to build. It's not like, a designer for 3 hours that you need to book in, is it? It's like a bit of a bigger thing. Have you gotten into that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. So creating those experiences again across Roblox, or increasingly it's more about kind of partnerships and brand placements and or brand placements the wrong word, but partnerships with existing, in the same way that I wouldn't necessarily create a brand new TikTok account. I'd probably talk to people who are already successful in that space and get them to talk about my product. It's a similar thing with Roblox. So if we're launching a movie or launching a product, or kind of just trying to get more interest and excitement around a character, then it might be better to actually just plop them into somebody else's Roblox world and try and create a brand new own one and build it up from scratch.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. I've got a 9-year-old who has been into Roblox for a while. Even at his age, they kind of laugh at brands who create Roblox experiences that are a bit naff, because they love naff things in general. They love laughing at kind of cursed AI content and all kinds of other stuff. And they really get the joke. They're quite incisive. They're quite they get it. So also, I heard someone describe Roblox, which is a good way to explain it to people who don't play it or get it, as it's basically like YouTube for games, and you have these. There's a lot of similarity between YouTube. It's all about the thumbnail, the virality of the hook and all that, but also about retention. And so you're right. If people are already turning up somewhere and there's already a popular experience people are taking part in, it surely makes sense to. And it's probably a lot easier as well to place a product there.
It can be. It's the same as having your own YouTube channel or doing partnerships. Obviously when you do partnerships, they live and die as quickly as the partnership happens. Whereas if you've got your own sustained channel, the downside is that if you've got your own channel, you've just got to invest in growing it, and it's a big beast you need to constantly feed. There's kind of pros and cons to each solution. Depends what you're trying to do.
It's a hell of a lot of work. Yeah, no, it's funny. You and I met through influencer marketing 15 years ago. I was with I and a few other people were taken out to LA to a big Xbox launch.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? And you were working at the agency that were running it, and that was in those quite Wild West early days, I think, of influencer marketing. And we've been on quite a ride since, haven't we? Like, I think my take on it is, I think it got a bit of a bad name because there were a lot of celebrities doing undisclosed stuff, and then over time it's matured into now it's just an established part of marketing. I mean, it's we really rely on creators and influencers a lot, I think, and I think a lot of the grubbier aspects of it, mostly anyway, have been and dealt with. So anyway, how does influencer marketing look in the youth space, if you like, in the kids, teens, and family space?
We would not use influencers for kids, because that's they're typically not on the platform, and it's a very grey area as far as is it manipulation or not. So there's a lot of kind of people that and we tend not to do it. And when I say tend not to, we've never done it, but I'm not saying that we never would if the right situation was there, but we tend not to. But we do it a lot with parents. I mean, with the parents that we deal with, and teenagers. So kind of 13 plus teenagers, we might do some kind of brand partnerships and kind of classic influencery stuff. But anything under that, it's not. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't pass a sniff test, as they say. So we tend to not do influencer marketing for those younger ones, but definitely.
Would YouTube be the only real place that you could do that anyway? Because that's the only platform that younger kids are watching, perhaps, or?
Yes, YouTube is. I mean, that's the main platform they're on anyway. So it's not like it's a compromise. YouTube Shorts is where they spend the vast majority of their time and lives.
But I suppose the point I'm making is, again, with kids, the age of my kids, I see that they consume YouTube, and I see there's sometimes product placements in those videos about Lego and Minecraft and whatever else they're watching videos about. And you saying that you wouldn't really do that, knowing that there's a 5-year-old potentially being influenced by that product placement.
That doesn't feel right.
Yeah,
that doesn't feel right. Again, never say never, but there was a big thing. It was a while ago now, called the Byron Review. I don't know if you remember that. It was about 10 years ago, and it was a big kind of review of children's marketing. And in there, she recommended that you don't kind of, because it leans into lots of things around social inadequacies, and because we don't have a total amount of control over it, the danger is children feeling like they are inadequate because they don't have the product, or that they are being unnecessarily swayed to buy the product because they think this, the relationship they have with the YouTuber might be improved if they bought the toys. That's one of those areas we kind of go, okay, that doesn't feel right, and so therefore we wouldn't do it. But if there was a creator that we thought actually we trust that they would not do those kind of classic manipulation things of kind of making somebody feel like they need this product, or that they would be socially inadequate if they didn't, or that their relationship with with them would be improved if they bought it, then I would be open to it. But at the moment, it's it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, you really do have quite a strong sense of that responsibility. How has it affected the way that you steward your own kids? I mean, they're older now, I know, but through their digital life and their life exposed to marketing, do you think you've handled that differently than other parents because of your experience?
I think so. We're quite strict. It is the it's slightly cliched, but so our children weren't definitely not allowed Insta or TikTok or anything until they were old enough. And even then, they're not allowed to post. So much of, and there's some really interesting stuff recently that came out that was basically saying there is actually not much correlation between screen time and poor mental health with children, but there is a massive correlation between children who post and mental health. So the danger of screens is much more about the fact that you seek validation from your posts, and you base almost your entire value on, does my post get liked or not, and do the comments that come against my posts, are they favorable or not? That's where the mental health challenge comes in. It's less about the kind of more content consumption side of social media. It's more about the sharing side. So we're quite strict on that side. We have quite strict screen time limits, and so yeah, I'm probably a lot more aware of it. Thankfully, my children are a little bit older, so we didn't have so much of you know the kind of iPad as a 2-year-old type thing, because that wasn't
Yeah.
really a thing when they were,
Yeah.
well, I don't think the iPad was around when my oldest was 2 anyway. But yeah, that was less of a challenge, but we definitely had the social media to cope with.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's just interesting to hear your take on it because you always hear these stories that like tech CEOs
Of a
don't even let their
total
kids have any devices. Thinking about the marketing, how do you measure the results of campaigns ultimately focused on driving behavior usage or watch time or whatever from kids? How are you measuring the kind of back to your clients?
Mm. Depends on the objective. So, if, for example, we're developing an experience, which is a kind of a branded experience, and that will be all about. So, if it's, for example, YouTube content, or if it's a Roblox game or an app, that will be engagement metrics. So, number of people reached, affinity. It will be engagement time, really. Affinity is a big one that our clients look for. So how much do the kids like the thing, the product, the brand? I have a few metrics that I really keep my eye on. One of them is favorites. So particularly when you talk about kids properties and whether or not, so take kind of preschool shows. If you've got a 5-year-old, then, for example, they could have a range of shows that they watch, and it could be up to 8, 9 kind of in the wheelhouse. And we've done quite a bit of kind of studying of it. And if you're not in that child's top 3, as a parent, you're not going to buy them a consumer product. If it's their 5th favorite thing, come Christmas time, if they're kind of half into, let's say, Gabby's Dollhouse, you're not going to go, I'm going to spend 70 quid if they're half into it. They need to be into it if you're going to stick 70 quid into a Gabby's Dollhouse playset. Favorites is one of the key things that we measure. If you're not in the top 3, you're not going to make any
How do
difference
you
in
find
that
that
child's
out?
life.
If
We
that's not a
ask,
good question. Oh, right.
we ask surveys, talking directly to children. A lot of it is, again, we got ways and means of kind of determining from children, like, which is your favorites, and then kind of doing a few different tests around that, and just doing top of mind. So what's your favorite TV show right now? And the first one they blurt out is 9 times out of 10 going to be their favorite, unless they were literally just watching something 10 seconds ago, in which case there's a recency issue there. But the parents are fairly well clued up these days on what is their kid's favorite. This, even though they're not really consuming the media in the same way that they probably were 10 years ago, they've got a good flavor of what's working and what's not working in most households. And also the answer is nearly always bluey. So, that's makes things quite easy.
It's funny. Right. And I suppose, I heard that stat last year that I think it was Google themselves, or maybe or Nielsen, that most YouTube viewing is now done on TVs. It's just tipped over the half mark. So just over half now of all YouTube viewing is on smart TVs. I don't know why that surprised me. I've got kids and, they watch YouTube on the telly, but I just thought it was maybe just us. But the point is that it's good that I think it's happening on a bigger screen. It's more visible. You can see what they're watching.
Yeah, that is making quite a bigger difference as far as kind of co-viewing. Again, we're
Yes.
kind of seeing co-viewing increasing a little bit since COVID, mainly because so much media was consumed that just parents didn't have the time to co-view, and they were ultimately a lot of the time using screen time as a kind of a, I don't want to say babysitter because that sounds kind of irresponsible, but as a means of getting on with their lives and not having to kind of constantly look after the child. So, but now as we're kind of seeing a reduction in screen time, or kind of a more increased eye on screen time, and with YouTube coming on the TV, we're seeing a lot more co-viewing, which I think is ultimately very good for brands. I think a lot of brands suffered quite heavily over COVID by just being invisible to parents because the children were in their rooms on the iPad watching stuff, not from a kind of a all danger perspective, but the parents had no idea what their kids were watching. Come Christmas time, and Granny says, "What do you want to? What can I get for grandson?" And the parents go, "I don't know what they're into at the moment." But at least now, I think it's becoming a bit more obvious as far as like, okay, the TV in the living room means that I know what they're watching and they're really into. Bluey. So yeah, lots of much more co-viewing. Again, I think that's really important and good for brands.
I think it's good for safety as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm personally a big advocate of knowing what your kids are doing and trying to do some of that with them and not letting them just go off into a room with a small screen device. It sort of starts to be out of sight. I'm less comfortable with that personally. So
I
I
think you're
think it's
not
a good,
alone either. So yeah, I think a lot
and
of
not
parents
alone.
are
Yeah,
much happier with their children watching stuff in the main room.
big time. Yeah. Um, I'd love to kind of hear how you got into this. I'd love to hear a bit about your career, really. Did you know you wanted to work in marketing? Did you start your career in marketing?
Yeah, yeah. So uh, I'll bore you with the whole story if you like, mainly because it sets a little bit of context. Um, Back in '92, I think, when I started my degree was in photography and electronic imaging. But for my final year, I really wanted to get into advertising. It was, to be honest, one of the reasons why I wanted to get into advertising was back in 1992, ads were probably the best things on telly. This was in the golden era of the Pirelli ads and the Michelin ads and the Levi ads, and just the ads were just awesome and really creative and just so much fun, and I just loved them. So I really wanted to get into advertising. And so actually my final year dissertation was on advertising on the internet, 94. So very early days of actually, no, maybe like 95, 96. But anyway, very, very early days, to the point where the final page of my dissertation, I listed all of the brand websites in the UK on just on one page. I think there was about 50.
My God.
So, this was how early doors it was. So I was always very, very interested in advertising and in marketing and in the internet and in digital. And it was just kind of on that cusp. So my first job was actually at Leo Burnett's, the big advertising agency, in their digital department, of which there was 3 of us in the entire digital department of Leo Burnett's. I dread to think how big it is now, probably tens of thousands. So doing some really very early doors internet marketing. So actually, interestingly, I did influencer marketing in '99 we launched the Game Boy Color, which wasn't a color screen, it was just a color box, so it wasn't grey. They'd launched a range of colored boxes, and we got to some people on some of those alt forums and some of the kind of the Newsnet forums, and basically asked them we sent them the thing and say, can you say nice things about the new Game Boy? So that was kind of back in '99, and then basically in kind of 98, sorry. So in '98, I then worked for an internet, it was actually a marketing agency in their digital department working on Disney.
Yeah.
So worked on like Hercules movie and the Toy Story 2 movie.
Well,
And then in '98, started my own agency. So I was, 22, 23. And this was back in
interesting.
the day, though. So
This is interesting though, because it sounds like you stumbled into the kind of brands that you would be working on today. I mean, you didn't stumble into working for an insurance brand or a manufacturing brand, so I'm sure that's in some way led you to where you are.
Yeah, entertainment has always been a kind of a through line, if you like, through my entire career. So that very first agency was called Foresight, and they specialized in entertainment. So my clients were Fox and Disney, but we also worked with McLaren F1. We worked with Snickers, worked on the Euro '96 project with Snickers, and a few other and then also like Sun Microsystems, because Sun Microsystems at the time were the computers that made Toy Story. So that's how we met them, and they went, oh, could you do some marketing for us? And this was, again, '98, '99, and everybody was going, oh, the future is the internet. So it didn't matter that I was 22 and kind of going, yeah, I know the internet. And they go, well, nobody else does. So great, go for it. So that's why I started my own agency back in the day. And our first clients were Disney, Fox. We did a lot of music stuff with Universal Music. And then over the years, started working more in gaming, which is obviously where I met you through the Xbox side of things. And then really it was when we started getting more and more involved with Disney. We ended up being one of Disney's biggest global suppliers outside of the US. And for all of their websites, we did like 28 country launches for their website products. And really Disney kind of said, if you want to continue to be one of our biggest, you've really got to understand kids better than anybody else. So I kind of took that mantle on and went, okay. And I doubled down my knowledge around children. And then, and then kind of about 10 years ago, started again. And that's the kind of the We Are Family journey that I'm on at the moment. So the kind of kids and teens have always been, and I've always enjoyed working with kids and teens, just because, again, as I mentioned, they change on a daily basis. You can't just sit back on your laurels and go, I think I know this audience now. You've just got to constantly be on it. And that's what I enjoy, constantly making sure that I'm pushing my own personal knowledge about what's going on in the world. And kids are one of the best ways of making sure that, because if you don't, you lose quickly. So yeah, it's good to keep on my toes.
That's really interesting. I mean, lots of follow-up questions there. And it's funny, it's making me feel good because usually I talk to people on this podcast and I feel old. So you go further back than me. That's great. But yeah, you've seen a huge amount of change over that time. You know, can you do any of the sort of key things, key massive shifts? I mean, really specifically in marketing and the way that marketing reaches us, and maybe some of the things that have remained the same.
Yeah, I think over the years we've got lazy with creativity. I think that we have, in some respects, outsourced intelligent creative ideas to algorithmic optimization. So I think that, if you look at what most marketing now is, just run some Facebook ads, some Insta ads, some YouTube ads. Let's just make sure we optimize the crap out of them so that they tick all of the various
Just let
boxes.
the numbers tell us what's working and run with that.
Yeah, and I think that's actually meant that brand building is nowhere near as good as it was, because I think that, again, we've got too fixated with the numbers and kind of gone, if the numbers aren't working, then this campaign and project isn't working. And I just think that there's so much that matters that you can't measure, or not that you can't measure, but that aren't measured through a Facebook dashboard. So I think in some respects, I think creativity has become a lot worse. And I keep getting excited by the kind of cookie-free world that we're all meant to be going into, because I think that might start shifting things back to creativity. Although each time, Google make the announcement, oh, we're going cookie-free, they're actually not. They've got something else that will kind of suck you back into their vortex.
And just for context for listeners, that would mean the going away of things like remarketing, very reliable, very data-led types of programmatic advertising. They're very effective, very efficient, but they don't require huge amounts of creativity. You throw a million things at the wall, you see what sticks, and the algorithm finds you buyers. And you're saying that if that goes away, it's back to brand building through really investing and getting behind an idea, a good idea.
Yeah, and the other thing that obviously that the cookies does is enables you to be super niche targeting. So you can kind of go, I want a 22-year-old woman in Birmingham who likes square dancing. You can actually do that. Whereas if actually, and I think that what that's done is driven much more kind of nicheification, let's go with that word, of audiences and of strategies, which are great for kind of raw number targeting perspective. But what I don't think they do is help grow a bigger kind of brand message and brand story, because all of a sudden the message becomes about what is your relationship with this brand, which I think is interesting. But then all of a sudden it then removes a brand from a bigger cultural kind of social story, societal story. So we see that, ultimately my job is to build fandoms. That's kind of almost our pitch to a lot of clients, is it's all about building fandoms, because you can no longer rely on an audience. You've got to kind of fight for every single audience that is out there. So really what you want to be doing is building a fan base, a fandom that kind of surrounds it. And actually the kind of nicheification means that fandom gets harder and harder and harder, because it becomes about, I'm not part of a fandom, this is just my individual relationship. And I actually think the brands suffer from that. I think that a brand that kind of is quite broad, that lots of people go, actually, this is a bigger thing. We do a lot of work in sport, and the whole sports thing is not, it's not about what is your relationship with that team. It's about what's your relationship with that whole fan base, kind of with all of its various kind of guises and its kind of various arms and various faces. And I think that ultimately builds much stronger brands when the fan has a relationship with a fan base rather than a kind of a one-on-one with the brand itself. So that's one of the biggest changes I've seen, is kind of a shift towards that kind of more niche stuff. But I do think that we're going back, because I think everything is cyclical and pendulum anyway. That's just the way that everybody works, is that whatever's not working, you just try something else. And so I think we're going back to that way. But yeah, that's probably one of the bigger changes, and the ethical thing and the moral thing. We would do stuff 15 years ago that kind of make me wince and cringe slightly at what we would do nowadays as far as what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
It was everything starts out as a bit of a Wild West.
It
And
was.
that's okay. There's a bit of gunslinging involved, and I think that's okay. And I think you're right. I think there is. You're not the only person to say there's a bit of a pendulum shift there away from hard data, talk of vibe marketing, or just, I think, trusting creative instincts. And because, again, that's obviously a reaction to AI. And people have realized that doubling down on human creativity is the right way to respond to sort of endless streams of AI slop. It's amazing we've got this far through the conversation without even mentioning AI. Now, I'll just quickly ask you, are you seeing the impact of AI on specifically what you guys do and how you work?
A little. So, I mean, actually, no, a lot. So we use AI, same as everybody else, from a kind of internal efficiencies perspective. We've not gone down the route as yet of kind of using AI to kind of replace human creativity. I'm not 100% against that, because I think there's lots of pros and cons of kind of human creativity. And I think at the moment, so much human creativity is locked up in people who just don't have the kind of ability to be able to create their vision from their head. So I think that actually there's a lot of people that might enter the creative space that aren't in it at the moment because they don't know how to draw or kind of use Photoshop, and actually all of a sudden they can be creative through this kind of external medium. I think, yes, we definitely, as has been the theme throughout this entire conversation, understanding the audience and making sure that there is a human understanding at the core of creativity will always be essential. I don't think that AI will necessarily replace that. We are seeing, what's interesting is there's a kind of two schools of thoughts around using AI to create content for children. And we don't do that, but we definitely see there's one school which is very much, that is the Antichrist in many respects. It's like, you cannot do that. That's just horrific. And then others are going, well, is it? Actually creating great content for children with a computer, is that as bad as kind of, I don't know. So I don't know the answer to that. I've not kind of had a proper.
Well, it's AI assisted, a lot of it.
Yeah, AI assisted. I mean, AI assisted, absolutely. But almost just going, to an AI engine, make me a kids' TV show, churn me out 52 episodes, 7 minutes long. Let's see what it looks like. I actually think it would probably be potentially be better than a lot of the other dross that can be out there at the moment. So there's a bit of me that thinks, could it be worse? Yeah.
But are brands that are coming to you, are they expecting that you are this AI supercharged powerhouse that can deliver loads of efficiency and pass that on back to them?
Do they want us to be efficient? If we said, "Oh, we use AI," I don't think they would. I think they expect us to anyway, because that's the logical and sensible
It's like saying,
thing
do
to
you
be.
use spreadsheets, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, exactly. Or do you use the latest design programs? Like, no one ever asks me what design programs I use. They just want to know, what does the output look like and how long will it take you to do it? And if those two match up, then they're happy. They don't mind either way. There's a lot of danger and a lot of appropriate skepticism about AI in research, and
Yes.
particularly around kind of qual moderation and understanding the kind of subtle human nuances that exist within that world. And our moderators have years and years and years of experience of being able to talk to children, but not just the talking to, it's the kind of understanding, okay, they said that, but they meant that. And AI is not there, but can AI look through a transcript and you say, could you tell me every time someone said the word Lego. Yes, it can do that, and then you can go back and watch that clip, and it kind of speeds things up. But it's definitely assistant at the moment rather than a replacement for any kind of humans. And as I say, no one. And I also think in the kids world and in research world, there's probably a lot more skepticism or concern around AI than possibly there is in other sectors, I would imagine. So we don't lead with it front and center, that's for sure. What we lead with is the output and the kind of the cost of the output. And I think that's the thing that most clients look at. They don't really care how you get there as long as it's a robust and considered and an intelligent approach.
Well, that's a good point. And what they're coming to you for is your expertise and experience, like with any service. And if you lead with being AI powered, that then makes you just like a million other companies. So I definitely wouldn't advise anyone to do that.
No, and our number one sell is we understand the audience, and we understand the audience kind of better than anybody else. That's our
And you know
sell.
how to keep understanding the audience because you nailed
And
that.
um, and that's all about institutional knowledge. And yes, maybe in 5, 10 years' time, AI will understand the audience just as well as a human can. But at the moment, that that's our superpower is our ability to be able to understand the audience and convert what a brand wants into something that the audience wants. And so as long as we've got that, I think we're in a good place.
I think you're all right. Good stuff. Thanks a lot. I feel like I've just learned so much. I really have. It's been interesting to sort of the way that you phrase things with such clarity and it's got my brain thinking a lot. Just boil down for me, what are a few main things that someone would need to consider if they were to start working on a brief that involved getting something in front of young people?
Understand the audience, and you really can't replace talking to the audience. So when I say understand the audience, reading a couple of briefing papers isn't going to be enough. You've really got to sit in a room and talk to them as much as you possibly can. As I say, we speak to tens of thousands, and one-on-one we speak to hundreds of children. And I would say that every single time I talk, and I still, even though it's technically not my job as the CEO, I still get involved in a lot of the moderation because it's just invaluable actually talking to this audience on a daily, weekly basis to kind of go, okay, that's different and that's new. Understanding the audience, absolutely. Immerse yourself in the codes of conduct and the ethics and the GDPR and the COPPA. If you're doing a global campaign, wowzers, it's really hard. France has a completely different set of laws around how you can advertise a toy. For example, if you were doing an advert for a unicorn toy in France and you had the toy kind of flying across a room, you wouldn't be allowed to do that in France because that toy can't fly. You would have to have a hand holding the unicorn flying it across the room. Whereas in the UK, you could have it, just kind of CGI float across the room. That's just one example of every country has a different set of rules and regulations about what you can and what you can't say, what you can show, what you can't show. Understanding every single one of those rules is sadly a kind of I would say 90, not 90, but probably 30% of what we do is just understanding guidance and rules and regulations. And again, constantly keeping an eye on our own rules and regulations, particularly with research as well, and the ethical responsibilities with talking to children around research is concerned. And then if I was to come up with the third one, it would be, I don't know.
I mean, how important is it, like for instance, do you play Roblox? How important is it to actually personally immerse yourself in the media space of
It's important. I play Roblox and I will watch Italian brain rot and and I will again, it's quite fortunate if you've got children in your life, but it's also quite dangerous if you've got children in your life because your child is going to be unique. There's only one of them, and the challenge can be my child does this, so all children must do this, and that's not necessarily the case. But I do play Roblox. I do, I am constantly on all the various places. I do read Reddit. I do go on Discord, even though I still don't quite understand how it properly works. But I do yeah, I keep on top of that. I don't watch as much preschool as I used to. Now, every now and again, I'll watch an episode of Bluey just to kind of go, what's going on here? Or yeah, other teenagey stuff as well. So personally immersing yourself in it. Again, you can't advise somebody on how to use Roblox if you don't, if you've never played it.
No, that's true. Because I always think that that not just with kids, it's just a common thing in marketing. Like you are often trying to understand a market that you are not personally, right? Whether that's a different gender to you, a different age group, different nationality, different sort of cultural slice of the population. And I agree. You can't just read a report and say you've got your head around it.
And actually, that goes back a little bit to a point you made earlier, that what is quite refreshing about the world that we live in is that people are quite happy to accept that they don't know what's going on in a 6-year-old's life. Particularly if they're a 40-something-year-old marketing director. Now, almost the challenge is if your target audience is 25 to 35-year-old, just people, then most marketeers will go, I know this. I don't need to study this audience. I am this audience. I understand this audience inside out. There's nothing new I need to learn from them because I am them. Whereas A, they're wrong, but B, it's much easier in my world to go, you're not a 6-year-old. You have no idea what is going on in a 6-year-old world. You got to do some research. So that's kind of, I guess, an advantage in some respects. But the disadvantage is when the marketing director goes, no, but I've got a 6-year-old and I know what they do. And you go, no, that's not the case. But yeah.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Well, look, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Taking up more than enough of it. And I'd like to say, learned absolutely loads. Just tell our listeners where they can find and connect with you online.
Maurice Wheeler on LinkedIn, or We Are Family. That's we-are-family.com.
Thanks so much, Maurice. Hope to chat to you again soon.
Thanks, Will. Good to see you again.